Hello, everyone. Alex Sokol Blosser here, winemaker and oversee the vineyards here at my family's place, Sokol Blosser. A continuation of our series, From Our Land to Your Hand, where we take deep dives into all things vineyard and winery. And today, we're going to geek out on yeasts. Yeasts and how they affect primary fermentation. So hopefully I don't lose anyone on this because yeasts can be pretty nerdy. And just so everyone knows, yeasts are everywhere. More about that later. Okay, so a little bit of history. Everyone ever heard of a Frenchie named Louis Pasteur or Louis Pasteur? Can't pronounce it. Well, Louis was the father of microbiology. So this is like back during our Civil War time in the mid 1860s. He was the first one to actually find a scientific connection. That means scientific connection, folks, between yeast, sugar, and fermentation. So before Louis, no one really knew what the hell was going on when you threw a bunch of grapes into a bucket and for some reason they turned into alcohol. They didn't know. Louis figured out actually it was these yeast cells that actually magically took the sugar and made it into alcohol. Oh, there is a God. Yeah. So before then, it was just, everyone knew it happened. You just need a little bit of sugar, and there are these yeasts. Don't forget, yeasts are everywhere, all over the place. And all of a sudden they get into this fermentation and they start making it go, and, it stops, and then there's no more sugar, but there's alcohol, and everyone's happy. So I can't get too much into a depth of this because when I took microbiology, when I was at Oregon State, I dropped it because I wasn't doing well. Anywho, that wasn't Oregon State's fault. That was me. I take responsibility for that. Okay, so a little bit of history. Now let's get into wine yeast. So when I say wine yeast, I'm talking about Saccharomyces cerevisiae. You're saying, what'd you just call me, Alex? That's right, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Time for my whiteboard. Okay, here it is, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Say that 5 times fast. You can do it. All right, so that's wine yeast. That is wine yeast. So folks, you can't take your active dry yeast that you use for making bread and make wine with it. Why not, Alex? Well, I'll explain. So wine yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is muy importante because it can withstand high alcohol. Most wine yeasts, or most yeasts, can't take the heat of alcohol and they die off. So a yeast is not a yeast. Every yeasts are different. And actually, just when you look at Saccharomyces cerevisiae, wine yeast, there are hundreds of cataloged Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and each one of them does different things. Well, what different things? Okay, so there are some Saccharomyces cerevisiae that are really quick and really speedy in terms of changing the sugar into alcohol. There are some yeasts, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, that actually do better when there's not as much sugar in the grape juice, meaning, they can only go up to so much percentage of alcohol. So they like lower alcohol wines. There are some yeasts that take a long time to ferment. They're slow yeasts. They're not as efficient. There are some yeasts that when you use them in the fermentation, they will produce a lot of what we call H2S or hydrogen sulfides that don't smell good, So you really, each wine yeast does something different. So over the years, you learn which yeasts go well with what you're fermenting. Then there are non-wine yeasts that come in off the vineyard that we call wild yeasts. These are yeasts that they're not Saccharomyces cerevisiae. They are what we would call Hanospora yeasts, And these are not alcohol tolerant. So as soon as there's like 1 or 2 degrees of alcohol in percentage alcohol in the wine, they'll die off. And the only thing remaining is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is our studette. She can kick ass. So Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the bomb.com. Now you'll see I have Saccharomyces cerevisiae beneus. That, she is a super killer. So if you are making a higher alcohol wine, you're not going to want to use just Saccharomyces cerevisiae that loves to party until about 14% alcohol. You want to bring in the she killer, which is Saccharomyces cerevisiae beneus. She's tough. She can go up to like 16, 18% alcohol, man. She can take it. So that is what that is for. Saccharomyces cerevisiae beneus. Say that 6 times fast. Okay, so the wild yeast that comes in, they can't take that much alcohol at all, so they die off. Just like baking yeasts. You can use wine yeast to bake with, but you can't use baking yeast to make wine with, because at around 6 to 10% percentage alcohol, that yeast will die, and then you have a stuck fermentation. You don't want a stuck fermentation. Believe me, you don't want it. Okay, so let's also talk about, there are yeasts we don't want. What are those, Alex? Brettanomyces. Yuck. See, you can read that. That's the sad face. That's the sad face of Brettanomyces. What happens when you get Brettanomyces? Listen, the brewers out there like it because they funkify the beer. Wine guys don't want it, man, because these are the kind of flavors that Brett will give you to your wine. If you want Band-Aid, you can't read my cursive. If you want Band-Aid flavors in your wine, bring on the Brett. You want a lot of barnyard in your wine? Bring on the Brett. You want like sweaty feet, wet dog? Bring on the Brett. Yeah, we don't want that. So Brettanomyces, spit that out. That's yucky. All right. So it is classified as a yeast. We don't want that. So we are going to look at Saccharomyces cerevisiae beneus. The examples that we have is actually, we have Sokol A. We have our own Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Whoa, yes. And we grow it, and then we add it into our ferments, but I'll talk about that later. We also use a yeast called Steinberger, Aspenhausen, Epernay, and then we have, these are not as creative names for the yeast, RC212, EC1118. Steinberger, Aspenhausen, Epernay. I hope those sound familiar because those are names of cities in the old country. So Epernay is a Champagne yeast. Steinberger is a yeast in Germany that they use for making more of an Alsatian, like Rieslings, Pinot Gris, and that's what we use it for. And then there's Aspenhausen, which is a nice, slow but steady yeast. Tough name, but that is a name in, I don't even know where that name is, but Aspenhausen. So there you have it. Okay, so let's put this all together. How do we use yeast here at Sokol Blosser? So it really depends on the lot. It depends on what is coming in, because we do 3 different things here at Sokol Blosser. We will inoculate with a commercial yeast. You saw the list of, these are some commercial yeasts except Sokol A. We'll inoculate with a commercial yeast because we'll know what it'll do. You get very much a controlled fermentation when you inoculate with a commercial yeast. We'll also inoculate with our house yeast. Yay, Sokol A! We found that in the Goose Pen block. So thank you, Goose Pen block, for giving us Sokol A. And the third thing we'll do is we'll do an ambient fermentation. What's an ambient fermentation? Well, some winemakers call it wild ferments. These are fermentations where the grapes come in, they go through the destemmer into our open top fermenter, and they'll just hang out until they start to ferment. Because there are yeasts all around, all over the place. So what typically happens is we've been making wine here since 1977 and growing grapes since 1971. So there's a lot of yeasts here at Sokol Blosser, all over the place. Sorry. So when the grapes come in and they come into the winery, It takes about, the quickest is 3 days, but usually it's more in the 7 to 9 day period where the fermentation will kick off if we're doing an ambient ferment. So, and we do as many ambient ferments as we can. There are some years when the fruit comes in and it doesn't look too good, where we'll do a lot of inoculations, because the inoculations, when we're inoculating with the commercial yeast, that will help speed the fermentation. And we know that if we inoculate with Sokol A or EC11118, we'll have a very quick fermentation. And sometimes that's what you want to make the best wine. But if the grapes are really clean, like in 2018, we did a lot of ambient ferments. We just let it go because the grapes are so clean and we weren't worried about there being a lot of in the grapes or on the grapes or where not. So, and yes, Brettanomyces can come in off the vineyard, as we've unfortunately found out. So when things are clean, more ambient ferment. And what happens with ambient ferments? Well, it starts off with all the wild yeasts that are there. The wild yeasts are like the Hanaspora. They are having a party, and then all of a sudden, once there's like a little bit of alcohol, because they had to work really hard to get a little bit of alcohol, they all go, oh my God, we're dead. And then right behind them are the she power yeasts of Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and they say, all right, boys, time for some power. And they just take over, and we don't know what Saccharomyces cerevisiae, because don't forget, there's hundreds of them out there. They'll take over the fermentation and see it through completion. They'll take that baton and take it to the end. Now, during fermentation, we're feeding the yeast with, sometimes it's oxygen, sometimes it's yeast food. What do yeast like to eat? No, we don't throw hamburgers and French fries into the fermenter. We throw, I don't even know what the heck is in it, but it's a product that gives the yeast a little bit of food. See, don't forget, I didn't make it through microbiology at Oregon State. Sorry. Anywho, we use this. It gives it a lot of nitrogen, and yeast love nitrogen. And then we just put in a steak that emits oxygen, and yeast loves oxygen. So that makes happy ferments. Happy ferments come from happy yeast. Yeast ain't happy, they'll let you know. How do they let you know? The fermentation will start smelling like a bad fart. Stinky, something stinky, hydrogen sulfides. Then we have to figure out what the hell is going on, and sometimes we have to add more yeast food, or we have to rotate the fermenter with punch downs or pump overs. Listen, the reason that I'm here as a winemaker is purely to manage fermentation. That is the biggest thing that I do in terms of which yeast to use, managing the fermentations. Where the rubber hits the road, what differentiates me from you is that fermentation management. That's it. Otherwise, you at home could probably make wine just as easily as I could. But you gotta know how to manage the fermentation. And that is why I'm the winemaker, and maybe you're not. Although maybe you are a winemaker, but that's cool too. So, in a nutshell, not really, but that is yeasts. So don't forget, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. If you learn nothing, just remember, she's a badass yeast, and she is the wine yeast. And the super wine yeast is Saccharomyces cerevisiae beneus. Hopefully you don't see her in a dark alley. She'll mess you up. Until next week, bye-bye.